You're listening to another ambitious entrepreneurnetwork.com podcast, the voice for entrepreneurs and small business. Now, onto the show.
Welcome to Industry Thought Leader Podcast. Stand out, be heard, influence. Want to influence real change with your message while become known as an authority in your field? Industry Thought Leader Podcast will show you how. Now, over to your host, Anne-Marie Cross.
Welcome to another episode of Industry Thought Leader Podcast, brought to you by Industry Thought Leader Academy. Stand out, be heard, influence. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross, also known as the Podcasting Queen. Now, my guest today says the best entrepreneurs I know live by one simple philosophy of ready, fire, aim. Don't spend your life planning to do something, do it. Someone who's doing it is my guest today, Paul McCarthy. Now, Paul is the best-selling author of the book, 8 Steps to a Remarkable Business. And he's an award-winning speaker who's influenced over 320,000 business owner. Now, Paul is also a highly sought-after copywriter and expert in customer centric marketing. Now, on today's show, Paul's going to share the 3 essential steps every business needs to take to instantly turn their website into a lead generation machine. He's going to talk about the simple but powerful formula that copywriters use to write more persuasive copy, but don't tell anyone else. Just keep this to yourself. And the 3 things that every business needs to know how to increase their conversion. So welcome to the show, Paul.
Oh, it's a great pleasure to be with you, Anne-Marie.
Such a good opportunity for us to really touch base within this, because many businesses now have had to reevaluate what they're doing moving forward. Many more businesses have gone online. And as we know from what you're talking about today, there are things that we need to be doing that many businesses are probably not. But moving forward, because so many more businesses are online, it means we have to be mindful of our copy, our content, our message, which is why today's show is just so amazing. Can I just ask you to share, how did you get into this field? Was it something that you'd always kind of had, writing, was that something you always enjoyed doing, or did you fall into it?
It was definitely a developmental thing. I think the writing side was something that came over time. Like any business owner, when I actually sort of fell into business a little bit, I guess, because I was a musician for a long time, and really, the issue for me musically was that I simply couldn't get music to drive my economic engine. I couldn't make enough to live. I could get it, to be this, well-paid hobby, but I couldn't get it to be a business, and that was, a great stress. But eventually, I guess the skills that I developed through my music journey led me to sales, marketing, started a consultancy, grew that. But I found that one of the barriers for me, and then ultimately for a lot of customers, is the way they're communicating their talent, and knowing how to tweak that a little bit so that you actually attract more people. So it's been an evolution for sure.
Wow. One thing I like about that is, and how you shared your journey, is how often business owners, well, I can't do that because it's not really a skill that I've always had, and it's something that I can't do. Whereas what you've just said, well, you didn't start off doing copywriting. You weren't born with a pencil in your hand, maybe drumsticks or something, I don't know, but so this can be learned, isn't it? And it's not that you need to be a rocket scientist or anything like that. What would you say, besides that, of course, is the biggest barrier to businesses really getting this, understanding it and adopting it, getting, their copy to a point that really connects and converts for them?
I think without doubt, Emery, the biggest challenge for people is that we spend our time in our sphere of expertise in our businesses, building that, thinking about that. And the biggest barrier or problem for us in terms of our communication is we write from that vantage point instead of stepping into the shoes of our buyer. So we're not thinking like a customer, and we really suffer, as Lee Lefevre talked about, that curse of knowledge. It's impossible not to know what you know, but it actually prevents you from often from getting back into the shoes of your buyer and seeing the world from their vantage point. And we're starting the conversation in the wrong place. And that's why so often people's content falls flat, doesn't really resonate with people.
Yeah. So we're thinking that, well, look, we are communicating, but people are just not understanding that we're talking too high level jargon, all of that kind of thing, which I love that you've highlighted that. But let's talk about the three essential steps that every business
Sure.
needs instantly to turn their website into a lead generation machine. What are these three essential steps?
Well, I think first of all is the ability to really quickly communicate what it is that you do in terms of the problem that you solve. So bringing clarity to that. If the reality is, I mean, there's a well worn system that's used online, and people could take the time to do this themselves. What they call the 5-second test, and basically, if you imagine, and for us that have been locked down in Melbourne for some time, we haven't been out and connected with other people. But imagine you're at a networking event or somewhere where you're surrounded by strangers, maybe business peers, but people that don't know you and necessarily know your business. And imagine that you have a laptop or a tablet or even your phone, and you bring it up and you hand it to them and you say, I just want you to look at my website, and you give them 5 seconds. And if in 5 seconds they can't tell you what you do, then you've got your first big problem. And that's where most people's websites fall down straight away. And it's because they're trying to communicate too much information too quickly, and people just shut down. They don't take it on board. So we've got to be able to really quickly clarify what it is that we do and who it is that we serve if we want to hold the attention of somebody when they land on a web page. Because all of us, certainly I do, I suspect that you and all of the listeners would do it as well, is when we go to somebody's webpage, we land, and if we don't, within those first few seconds, find what we expect, we simply click back out and we go down to the next search. And so that's the first stepping stone, is can I clearly communicate what it is that I do in a way that people are going to go, great, I've come to the right place.
Yeah, brilliant. And that in itself, I would imagine, is such a difficult thing for people to really define. I mean, we can back up right now and go, once you get clear on that, because so many of us as business owners, we have different skill sets, but it's really refining it and defining it into one clear statement that really speaks and adds value, and obviously what the outcomes that our ideal client is looking for. So I love that. So that's the first one. What is the second essential step?
The second essential is really that you need to then very quickly be able to communicate with people what the call to action is for them. I think a lot of people treat their website like a glorified brochure that's a bit of an information catch-all, but then it doesn't really lead people to be clear about what you want them to do. So what I would encourage all entrepreneurs to do, all business owners, is to make sure that their call to action button is right there, front and center, straight in that first part, the first fold of the website, that whatever that is that you want them to do, if it's to call for an appointment, it's to ask for a quote, to buy now, whatever it is, just that one transformation can have a huge impact on the results that a website produces in terms of sales, because most people are forced to try and navigate and figure out, well, what am I supposed to do? How do I, and so we have contact numbers and stuff, but it's not clear what the pathway is. So that would be the next most important thing to do, is be very clear on what action you want your visitor to take.
Yeah. Often we've probably heard this saying before, that an overwhelmed person will just do nothing. And so they may be clear, but then if you tell them, well, give us a call and sign up for this and go here and do all of that, people go, I'm confused anyway. Would you find that the reason why we haven't got that clear call to action is because as business owners, we haven't clearly defined what that call to action should be? What do we want to do? Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, almost certainly. What it is our own confusion, and it leads from a well-worn reason that people's marketing fails in the first place, and that is people, and you and I have spoken about this before, the idea that good marketing is counterintuitive. Most people think that their best chance of success is to tell people about all the things they can do. But the reality is the complete opposite. It's actually about a tight niche. And once you get clearer on that niche, then you get clearer about the action that your audience should take. And I think if we as business owners don't do the work to think it through, then we leave it to the customer to do the work. And as you say, and confused minds never buy. They just move on because they don't want to waste their energy. They'll go somewhere that makes it easier for them.
Yeah. And I would imagine too that you've got to think of this, what's the best call to action for you as a business owner? Because if you know that your time is limited and everybody that you have got a call to action, ring me, and they go to message bank and you're just not going to get back to them, well, then that's not the best call to action for you to add. And who is your ideal client? Are they going to want to call, but do you know that in their customer journey, they need a little bit more information first? So the next step is to give them some more information that they need. So it's a bit of a process to get to that call to action. Just isn't, well, I'm going to copy what everyone else does. I'd imagine that you work with a client through that and determining what that best call to action is for you and for them, and come to that happy medium. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. You're spot on. And this is the thing is, I remember a friend of mine from years ago who's a web designer, and she was talking about the fact that she was looking for a gym, and she'd gone to a gym site and she'd filled in the inquiry form. And 3 months later, she still hadn't heard anything. So they've got a process of filling this inquiry, but no one's manning it. No one's even looking at it. So you're absolutely spot on. You've got to have a call to action that makes sense, that is going to actually, help you build the relationship with the customer, not damage the relationship with the customer.
Yeah, love that. What's the third essential step?
Well, the third is thinking about, if you like, an indirect call to action or a call to attention, which is, do you have something on your website that is compelling enough for me to exchange my name and email in return for that? So what we would call in marketing a lead magnet, having a reason for someone to connect with you. So they may not be ready to engage in a buying conversation or to take that step, but they might, if you can provide some good information that helps them to move forward, to solve a problem, that they'll exchange. And that's one of the most vital tools in business, is your ability to consistently build a list and have people coming in, because we're going to now have the opportunity to nurture and develop a relationship, build the trust, and do all that. When people are visiting your website, it's a one-way journey. I mean, we can do things like retargeting and follow them with ads around the web and so forth. But in terms of actually engaging in a conversation, getting to know them, and them truly getting to know you, we need to create a reason for them to connect with you. And so most people's websites don't have a good lead capture strategy in place, and therefore they are just a place to come and visit and move. And one of the principles we teach is what we call the rule of 6. And that is, from my old music industry, is the idea when a commercial radio station plays or adds a song to the playlist, they typically put it on what they call high rotation, with one aim: to get you to hear it at least 6 times as quickly as possible, so that you don't change the channel. Well, the same principles hold true in business. We need multiple touch points to build a relationship, establish this trust, but we don't give ourselves a chance unless we create a compelling reason to connect.
Yeah. And what I love about that is so important is that whatever you put together as that compelling piece of content, make sure it's compelling. Because how often do business goes, well, I know that I need a call to action, and then what Paul has just said, so I'm just going to give them this. Because whatever it is that you're offering them, is often the first real interaction that someone has with your business and with your expertise. Make sure it's excellence, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You couldn't. It's so true. Is people get nervous about giving away the good stuff, but if you package up and give away the garbage, then you're not going to advance the relationship at all. People will have made a decision about you, so you're spot on. You've got to give really good information and content away.
I'm sure, Paul, that you have heard people say, and probably with your content too, I cannot believe, Paul, that you gave that away, because people will think, if this is what they're giving away for free, imagine what it would be like to actually work and invest with them. And I think, when gone is that scarcity mindset where don't give, keep keep hold of that, because you could never package the essence of you, within that giveaway. And Rajiv is here is saying, great conversation. Love that. We have only just started scratching the surface, because Paul is going to share with us now the simple but powerful formula that copywriters use to write more persuasive copy.
Well, this is something that Anne-Marie, that anybody could add to any of their, communication structure, particularly when they think about your emails, the way you're nurturing a client. The system that most copywriters will follow in that is what they call PAS, P-A-S. So it's an acronym that really spells out the structural content of an email. So the P stands for pain. So marketers understand that the human dynamic is that most people are coming into your world because they have a problem. And so we talk about the problem, about the pain, the issue, the thing that's on their mind. The A in the model is then we agitate the pain. We actually want to stimulate the idea around that pain, because we want to get people connected to the emotion of it. What's the implication of it? What does it actually mean to them, to their life, to their future? And then the S is solution. So the way that most people, when they're communicating, do it is or if you like, the amateur, if you like, is communicating, is they're leading with their solutions. And if we were to break selling down into sort of 4 simple components, and we'd say, okay, sort of for 4 quadrant, if you like, process. Quadrant 1, we'd say, is rapport building. We establish a connection. Quadrant 3 is solution. Quadrant 4 is action, moving them to buy. And what most people slide past is quadrant 2, which is your most important when you're selling, is pain. What's the problem? In a world of where, I've taught a lot of sales training over the years, and my simple philosophy is no pressure selling. Nobody wants to be pressured into buying. But if you're going to create a no pressure environment, the only way to do that is to first establish what is the need. If there's no need, if there's no pain to solve, well, there's no sale. So we first established that, and my, the best way I can explain it to people is, if we imagine, haven't been feeling very well, and you head to the GP, you're sitting in the waiting room. The doctor comes out, she invites you into the surgery. She says, I haven't seen you for a while. How are you doing? How's the family? All those sort of things. That's the rapport building. Let's imagine, and she says, anyway, what brings you here? And you say, well, look, here's the problem, doc. And you begin to speak, and she says, stop. Don't say another word. She grabs out the prescription pad, she fills it in, she hands it to you, says, now, all right, off you go to the pharmacy, get that filled out, you'll be fine. And you suddenly go, listen, I haven't actually even told you what's wrong with me. And she said, no, don't worry, I'm a doctor, trust me, you'll be right. Well, the question is, how long do you keep going to a doctor like that? Well, as somebody in one of my audience once said, it depends on what they prescribe, right? So, but the thing here is that is the way most people sell. And this is whether they're writing it or doing it in person. They aren't spending the time to find out what's, distressing the person, what the issue is, and they're not agitating and really digging into that to understand its implication to the person before they move to solution. They go to solution way too fast, which then pushes them into what I call convincing mode. Yeah. And when you're in convincing mode, you don't win many sales.
Yeah. What I think is such a great reminder of what you're sharing with us, and it's so important. And as you said, often we don't want to be the person that's bringing up, as you said, that pain. But it actually builds rapport when we speak around the struggle. And often what we are talking about and sharing is very much what we've experienced ourselves, because many of us have become specialists in certain areas because we've learned principles, we've come up with principles. And by sharing that and recognize, look, are you struggling with this? And is this causing this? And people go, yeah, that's actually me. How often do people, after reading an article or listening to a podcast or just reading the website, go, you really get me. You really understand me. And there's something so endearing about that, because you build trust, don't you? And part of that relationship is that trust, and being heard, or felt that you're being heard and understood, is one of the greatest gifts that I think you can give someone. Yes?
Oh, you're so spot on the money. It's as you say, one of the greatest needs of all human beings is to feel understood.
Yeah.
So when people feel heard, understood, they feel they can relate to you. So I'd say, from a marketing perspective, one thing for people to keep in mind, or if you like, one caveat to that process, very powerful to share wherever you can. If your story of struggle links to the journey of your customer, then sharing that is great. The only caveat is you cannot talk to people about a problem you're still having. So you have to focus on, okay, the journey you've come through, so then you can look back and you can say, okay, yes, I've experienced it, I've had those challenges, but I've got to be on the other side of it, because one of the part of this is, obviously, good marketers have obviously two things, or business owners have two things they must be doing. You've got to have empathy for who you're serving, but you've also got to have competence. And it's
Yeah.
no good saying I'm an accountant and making jokes like, oh, accountant, I'm an accountant, but numbers, man, I'm no good at numbers. It's like that wouldn't work. Right? Yes. So self-deprecation and showing vulnerability are really powerful marketing tools, but you have to have arrived past that point of struggle to be able to provide advice to others.
Yeah, so true. What I love about what you're saying there is I've often shared with people, depending on where you're at in the journey, how many of us have been told, well, you need to write that in a book. If we still haven't gone through that journey of healing and complete kind of walking through that, you need to write that in a journal for yourself, get through the other stage first, and then write a book. This is what Rajiv has said. I think it's really beautifully adds to what we're saying and what you've been saying, Paul. Brands are moving into emotional engagement to build the much needed relationship around needs and building of loyalty. And I love what you have just shared there, is that if it is in our story and our journey, we've come out the other side and we're sharing lessons, and you're just out there sharing that content in any form that you're using, that people will resonate with that. And you can really speak to that with authenticity, integrity, and excellence. And I love that. And Sharu's there, wonderful share. I know, but we still haven't finished. Don't go away yet. Paul is still going to share with us the three things that every business needs to know to increase conversion. Before we step into that, what would you say to someone who maybe is still struggling to use with that, use the acronym, the formula of PAS, maybe the problem they haven't really clearly defined that, means a bit more research, agitating that can sometimes be something that they're struggling with. And then the solution, if we're sharing it in a storytelling way because we've lived it, we've experienced, I think then that a lot of those challenges where we feel we don't want to kind of push the problems for our customers. One thing that I've learned, and I remind myself of, Paul, is that if I'm not speaking into that, what happens then if my ideal client remains stuck? And I had a lifeline to be able to support them, yet by not using the formula of PAS, they've remained stuck because they didn't realize that I had the solution. That kind of helped me. Are there any insights you can share around that? Because this is what a lot of businesses struggle with too, don't they?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people back off, and it's a common thing when we talk about building sales funnels, automation of emails and communication, and building at least a 6 sequence campaign as a minimum that's going in behind. Some people are nervous about, I don't want to be seen as being pushy or too much. Well, that's only going to happen if the messaging that you're putting out is all self-focused and all about buy my stuff. As you're talking about, what you're talking about, and the distinction between these is that we're not talking about sending messages that are based like that. What we're talking about is, we have to, and you've articulated it beautifully, is that what we're looking to do is we are helping people to find the inner drive, if you like, to enroll in their own transformation. And the hardest part is inertia, moving someone, getting them. And we've all been there. We've been to that point where we were stuck, and you're in that phase and you keep sort of wrestling with it. I mean, there's a wonderful book that I've read. In fact, I love to reread it and go over it, that Stephen Pressfield wrote, called the War of Art. And it's really about, and the essence of it is all about resistance. Resistance is our great enemy. It's that thing that whispers in your ear and says, oh, don't do that, they might think this. But at the end of the day, if everyone's sort of treading around on eggshells, worrying about how they're going to be perceived, then they don't get fully invested in the service of their clients. So, I mean, for me, I'm never embarrassed or ashamed to invite people to come and work with me, because I know of the results that we produce. And so, but I understand also that sometimes it takes people time to get to that point where they're ready, as the lovely Zen proverb, when the student's ready, the teacher appears. So there's a level of readiness. So part of our responsibilities as a marketer is, how do I help the person find their way to readiness so that they feel comfortable and realize, yes, it is time to act. And most of us, unfortunately, we seem to want to wait until we're in sort of dire straits, significant pain, really, wait till it's, the last gasp, and we go, okay, I better do something different. So I think it's in everybody's best interest to see if they can get out and service. And when you do something well, as many of your listeners they're going to be really good at what they do, then wouldn't it be horrible to say, well, I didn't do everything I did to get to work with that client. Instead, I sort of backed off and they ended up having a substandard outcome because they went to somebody who just didn't care and put in as much energy as I was going to.
Exactly. So true. I remember one time we did a LinkedIn campaign, and we were sharing about one of our podcast workshops. And I still recall someone ringing and enrolling in that and said, I'm so glad you sent that message through and, become a client. And to me, that was such a great reminder of, imagine if I said, no, I don't want to do that because I don't want to offend people. Yet here was someone that said, I'm just so glad that you did. And as you said, sometimes these people are searching and unfortunately they enroll in something that just isn't the good fit. And to know that you had the solution in the way that you shared it, the approach that you have would have just beautifully impacted their lives, I think, hopefully will give you the insights that you need. You know what? I'm going to do that. So let's talk about the 3 things that every business needs to know in order to increase their conversion. This is something that many of us can struggle with too if we don't know this. So what are these 3 things?
Well, I'd say, the very first thing is really in terms of the mindset that we're approaching what we're doing. And I would say we have to come to the table with a mindset of we serve before we sell. We've got to lead with service. It's how can I add value? How can I be of service to people first and establish that connection, that relationship? I think that all of us, I was chatting, I was doing a session with a client the other day who was brand new, and they had been trying to get some, energy going around a program they were offering out that'd been impacted by the COVID, and they were trying to figure out, and they'd been doing some social media stuff and boosting posts. And what I explained to them was, a lot of it was they were just trying to drive a cold audience to a sales message. And I said to them, tell me the last time someone out of the blue asked you to buy something just out of the blue and you bought it straight away. And they said, I can't remember. And I said, so why are you trying to do that to other people? So if we understand, that's not how people want to buy. They want to be able to get a taste test. They want to be able to connect with you. They want to feel comfortable. And so we've got to find mechanisms to make that happen so that we can move people into our world and nurture them before we whack them over the head with, buy my stuff. So, I mean, the first thing is also, depending on the courses and the programs that you do, this was, a turning point for me was understanding that not everyone's your buyer as well. So, that you get a bit more discerning.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I just recently heard was from Amy Porterfield, and hopefully I paraphrase this correctly because it really speaks to what you're just talking about. She said, what is going to impact your conversions and sales is not what you do when the cart is open, but what you do prior, and all of the significant time that you've invested in the relationship before you ask for that sell. And it's so true, isn't it? It is a relationship. And as you've said before, everyone is at a different stage, and every one of us as consumers, we have a different buying system, if you will. Some of us require a little bit more information. Some of us will look, read, hear, and go, yep, that's for me. And so we need to create what you're talking about, the different relationships, different stages, different platforms that helps engage and just give that information so that we can nurture those existing clients. And once it's there, once it's built, it's not something that you have to continue to rebuild. It's there, it's working for you, and you can just then continue to kind of be out there and share this great content that gets people into that relationship building funnel. What's the other thing? What's another thing that we need to know about conversion increasing?
Well, I think that a big thing, and I guess I just alluded to it, and it was, massive for me, was client selection and who you're actually talking to. When I started, I grew up in a suburb of Melbourne called West Heidelberg. It's a very working class. It was the site of the Olympic Village in 1956. And when the Olympics were that's where the athletes lived during the Olympic Games. And when the Olympics were over and the athletes had all gone home, the government decided that would be a good place to put all the poor people in one, sort of foul swoop. And that's where I grew up, in a little concrete prefab house, 12 squares, bolted, concrete walls bolted together, that sort of environment. So it's a very, it's a low socioeconomic environment. But I grew up in that environment, although I left living there. Sorry, someone just fell over. I left living there in my late teens, but I realised, later in my life when I'd gone into business, West Heidelberg hadn't finished living in me, and so that scarcity mindset led me to attracting anybody and trying to save everybody. And so what I ended up doing was I filled up my bucket with a lot of high need, low value clients that wanted everything but didn't want to pay much for it. I was running around like a madman, exhausting myself. So I was converting the wrong types of people and therefore not getting to the high quality clients that I wanted to. And it was a mentor of mine at that time that said to me, as long as you keep saying yes to everybody, they're all going to keep coming in and you're never going to have room for anybody else. And so I did something at that stage, which was, a bit of a life changer for me, which was I sacked my first client. I did it very respectfully, but it was such a relief, and it opened up a new pathway, really, more than anything in my mind, that what was really possible. And as soon as I did it, almost, it started to open up this new wave of different quality of clients coming in. And all of those things then come together in terms of the work you're able to produce, the outcomes you create, the rewards they enjoy. So everything improves. So I think if your methodology for client selection is that they have a heartbeat and a wallet, and the heartbeat's kind of optional, then you've got a problem. That it really is about get switched on about that not everyone is your buyer.
Yeah, and Rajiv just, absolutely agrees. Not everyone's your buyer. So true. Similarly, I'm not also of service to everyone. The sweet spot is the relationship spot we are seeking, which is exactly what you have just said. I think in that instance, Paul, that's something that a lot of business owners struggle with too. I mean, who is your ideal client? But it is such a transformational aspect because, you then speak to that tribe. And if it's a tribe that you do your best work with, even your content, the programs you put together can be really honed to help them. And what I have found, if I think back to the career industry, some of my colleagues who you would naturally assume are my competitors became my advocates, and they became my collaboration partners because they said, well, we don't want to specialize in that area. Can we incorporate you into our packages? And that only came through because I really specialized. I identified where I wanted it to kind of become known as that trusted authority in. And that can open up lots of opportunities, even with people who people might see from the outside that's a competitor. You found that to be true too?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just what happens. So, yeah, you really can create a rod for your own back if you're not careful.
Yeah. Now, I'm not sure. We've covered so much. But there's still one other thing every business needs to know when it comes to increasing conversion, or we've covered those?
Yeah, look, we've covered most, but I would just come back to the point, which is, we've touched on in different phases, but it would be that that we want to make sure that we're being patient enough to develop the relationship. A lot of people are rushing to the sale, and basically they've set their business up in a way that they run into an opportunity or a lead. They say to that person, "Would you like to buy?" The person says no, and then they move on hunting for the next person. And really, in terms of converting prospects and bringing them in, it's understanding that the mechanics and the time that's going to be required to get them to their buying decision has continued to increase over time. But then also understanding conversion from inside, which is, well, how do I continue to communicate and talk to them so they become what we call an ascended, full value client, ascended within your structure. So, I might, have somebody start in a simple program that's only a few dollars, but they might be worth tens of thousands of dollars down the track over time by really fostering a relationship and developing that. If you kind of walk out and just say, "Here's my big thing, do you want to buy it?" No, and move on, you're probably going to find it very hard to convert the true value of a client and understanding the lifetime value of a client that you're working with.
And within those various aspects, there's absolutely things to consider from even your product offerings as well. You mentioned, and I think if people miss that, you may have a lower value product offering, but that provides such immense benefits and outcomes, and for the smaller investment, that a client will say, "Man, I got so much value out of that. What's the next step?" And often business owners, we haven't even kind of mapped that out, because the customer buying, journey doesn't just stop once a customer buys. And we know that saying is that it takes 7 times more to cost wise to get a new client than it does to continue to enroll and to continue to kind of lead people down that pathway, the program pathway. So those are all things that we need to consider too. And I think as businesses, that can often be a bit disjointed, because customers are always looking for what next. And if we don't provide that, they will search for other alternatives, won't they? So better that work and remain with us so that we can continue to see them through than to go off. And often what ends up happening is they kind of does not destroy, but all of the good work that you've put into place gets changed or dropped or something, because off they go in another direction, which is sad. Paul, I know we've covered a lot, but we've only really just scratched the surface. And I know people are thinking, "Man, I need to connect with Paul." What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, you can go to the marketersclubacademy.com is the website. So if they head over to the Marketers Club Academy, they'll find me over there, and they can connect, and we can take it from there.
Fantastic. Look, thanks once again for coming on the show, Paul, sharing your expertise. Go and connect with Paul, hang out at that website, and you'll see that what we've covered today is so very important, especially moving forward with so many more businesses online. Make sure that your content not only stands out, but really connects and provides such exceptional value that when you do finally get a customer, it's a customer for life because of what you're delivering for them. So thanks once again for coming on the show, Paul.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you.